They say music brings people together, but I didn't think it would bring my wife together with a guitarist in the most literal sense. It's funny, really, I was the one who bought her the concert tickets, thinking it would make her happy. Turns out, the music wasn't the only thing that struck a chord with her. I'm Ryan, 36, a software engineer who prefers a quiet evening at home to the chaos of live music. My wife, Emily, 33, has always been the opposite, vibrant, social, and the kind of person who thrives in a crowd. We've been married for 10 years, and while we've had our ups and downs, I thought we had a solid foundation built on mutual respect and love. It all started innocently enough. Emily has always been a fan of indie rock, and when she stumbled across a local band playing at a small venue downtown, she couldn't stop talking about them. The lead guitarist, Jason, seemed to be her favorite topic of discussion. "He's so talented," she'd say, her eyes lighting up. I didn't think much of it. Everyone has their idols, right? When she mentioned wanting to see them live, I decided to surprise her with tickets. It felt like a thoughtful gesture, a way to show her that I cared about her interests even if they weren't my own. She was thrilled, hugging me and gushing about how amazing it would be. I felt like a good husband, making her day with something as simple as concert tickets. The night of the concert, Emily left the house with a sparkle in her eye. She dressed up more than usual, her excitement palpable. I stayed home, happy to let her enjoy herself while I caught up on some work and relaxed. She came back late, buzzing with energy and talking nonstop about the performance, the crowd, and of course, Jason. Over the next few weeks, Emily became even more invested in the band. She started following them on social media, sharing their posts, and playing their music constantly. I found it endearing at first, like watching someone rediscover a piece of their youth. She even started attending more of their shows, dragging along a few friends who shared her enthusiasm. But then things started to feel off. For one, Emily's enthusiasm for the band seemed to extend beyond just the music. She began mentioning Jason more frequently, not just as a talented musician, but as someone she'd started chatting with after shows. She called him down-to-earth and easy to talk to, brushing off my raised eyebrow with a laugh. I told myself it was harmless. Emily was outgoing and loved making connections with people. It was part of what made her so likable. But as the weeks went on, her behavior became harder to ignore. She started attending shows more frequently, often without her usual group of friends. She'd leave early and come home late, her face flushed with excitement, but vague about the details of her night. "It was amazing," she'd say, her smile wide but her explanations thin. One evening, while tidying up the living room, I found a backstage pass tucked into her bag. It was personalized, with her name neatly written across the top. When I asked her about it, she said Jason had given it to her so she could avoid the crowds and chat with the band after the show. She shrugged it off as no big deal, but something about the way she avoided eye contact made my stomach churn. As the weeks turned into months, Emily's obsession with the band grew. She started dressing differently, tighter jeans, bolder makeup, clothes that felt more suited to a concert venue than a casual dinner with her husband. She spent more time on her phone, her face lighting up whenever she received a notification. It wasn't until I overheard part of a phone conversation that my suspicions solidified. Emily was in the kitchen, her voice low but animated. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. She sounded like a teenager talking to a crush. When I walked in, she abruptly ended the call, her cheeks flushed as she muttered something about it being one of her friends. I didn't confront her then. I wasn't ready to believe what my gut was telling me, wasn't ready to admit that the woman I loved might be slipping away. Instead, I started paying closer attention, looking for patterns and inconsistencies. And there were plenty. The unease I'd been feeling since Emily started following the band had settled into something sharper, more like a persistent ache. Every time she mentioned Jason, it felt like a subtle jab, her words laced with a kind of excitement that had become less about the music and more about him. I told myself I was overthinking it, that I was being paranoid. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Emily started attending their shows more frequently, sometimes traveling to nearby cities to see them perform. At first, I thought it was just a phase, a rekindling of her love for live music. But the frequency of her trips, coupled with her growing obsession with Jason, made it harder to believe that it was just about the band. One night, While scrolling through social media, I stumbled across a tagged photo of Emily at one of the shows. She was standing next to Jason, her arm casually draped over his shoulder as they both smiled for the camera. The caption read, "Hanging out with the best fans after the show." I stared at the photo for what felt like an eternity. On the surface, it seemed harmless, just a fan meeting her favorite musician. But there was something in the way she leaned into him, the familiarity in her posture, that made my stomach churn. I decided to dig deeper. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention to Emily's behavior. Her phone, which used to sit forgotten on the kitchen counter, was now always within reach. She glanced at it frequently, smiling at messages she didn't share with me. Her excuses for leaving the house grew thinner, her explanations vaguer. One evening, while she was in the shower, I noticed her laptop open on the kitchen table. It wasn't something I'd normally snoop through, but the growing knot of suspicion in my chest pushed me to take a closer look. What I found stopped me cold. Her email inbox was open, and near the top was a thread with the subject line, "Next show plans, can't wait to see you." It was from Jason. I clicked on it, my hands trembling as I read the exchange. The emails were casual on the surface, but the subtext was impossible to miss. They'd been corresponding for weeks, talking about upcoming shows, planning to meet up afterward, and sharing inside jokes that made it clear this wasn't just a fan-musician relationship. In one message, Jason wrote, "Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about it. Let's do it again soon." Emily's reply was short but telling. "Me too. Can't wait." My heart sank as the implications hit me. This wasn't just an innocent crush or a harmless infatuation. Emily and Jason were having an affair, and she'd been hiding it right under my nose. I closed the laptop and sat there in stunned silence, the weight of what I'd just discovered pressing down on me like a physical force. The woman I'd shared my life with, the person I trusted most, had been lying to me. And the worst part was, she didn't even seem to feel guilty. That night, I couldn't bring myself to confront her. Instead, I stayed up late, replaying every interaction, every red flag I'd ignored, every excuse I'd brushed off. The pieces were finally falling into place, and the picture they formed was devastating. The next day, Emily left for another show, claiming she was meeting up with friends. I nodded and smiled, pretending to believe her, but inside, I was seething. I decided to follow her, to see for myself what she was hiding. The day Emily left for another show, claiming it was a girls' night out, I knew this was my chance to confirm everything I'd been suspecting. She'd been vague about the details, who she was meeting, what time she'd be back, and her excuses were beginning to sound like a broken record. I told her to have fun, keeping my tone light, but inside, I was bracing myself for what I might find. After she left, I waited an hour before grabbing my keys and heading out. I knew exactly where the band was playing that night, a small venue downtown that Emily had mentioned more than once. I parked a few blocks away, not wanting to risk her seeing my car, and walked toward the venue. The streets were buzzing with concertgoers, and I felt a strange mix of anger and dread as I joined the crowd. When I arrived, the show had already started. The music pulsed through the walls, a driving beat that seemed to echo the tension in my chest. I slipped inside and found a spot near the back where I could watch without being seen. My eyes scanned the crowd, searching for Emily, and it didn't take long to spot her. She was near the front of the stage, her face lit up with excitement as she swayed to the music. Jason was just a few feet away, his guitar slung low as he played to the crowd. Emily's focus was entirely on him, her expression a mixture of admiration and something deeper, something I didn't want to acknowledge but couldn't ignore. As the set ended and the band left the stage, the crowd began to disperse. I stayed where I was, watching as Emily lingered near the edge of the crowd. She pulled out her phone, typed a quick message, and glanced toward the side entrance of the venue. Moments later, Jason appeared, slipping out of the backstage area and heading straight for her. I stayed in the shadows, my heart pounding as I watched them embrace. It wasn't a casual hug. His hand lingered on her back, and she leaned into him, her face lighting up in a way that I hadn't seen in months. They exchanged a few words, then walked off together toward the back of the venue. I followed at a distance, my hands shaking as I pulled out my phone and began recording. They stopped near a dimly lit alley, where Jason leaned against the wall and Emily stood close, her hands gesturing animatedly as they talked. She laughed, a soft, intimate sound that made my chest tighten, and then it happened. Jason leaned in, and Emily didn't pull away. Their kiss was brief but deliberate, a moment that confirmed everything I'd been trying to deny. My stomach churned as I captured it on video, the final piece of evidence I needed. They stayed in the alley for a while, talking and laughing like they were the only two people in the world. I watched from the shadows, my emotions swinging between anger and heartbreak. This wasn't just a fling. This was something deeper, something that had been building for weeks, if not months. When they finally left, heading back into the venue, I stayed behind, trying to collect myself. The proof was on my phone now, undeniable and damning. I knew what I had to do, but the thought of confronting Emily filled me with dread. How do you look someone you love in the eye and tell them you know they've been lying to you? I drove home in silence, the weight of what I just witnessed pressing down on me like a physical force. Emily came back later that night, her demeanor cheerful and carefree. She kissed me on the cheek, thanked me for being so understanding about her girls' night, and went to bed without a second thought. I stayed up, staring at the video on my phone, replaying it over and over again. The trust we'd built over 10 years of marriage was gone, shattered by the images on the screen. I knew I couldn't keep this to myself much longer. After that night, I couldn't look at Emily the same way. Every smile she gave me, every touch, every casual comment about her girls' night felt like a dagger. The video on my phone wasn't just evidence of her betrayal. It was the death knell of the trust we'd built over a decade of marriage. But as much as I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, I wasn't ready. I needed space to figure out my next move, to decide if there was anything worth salvaging. The next morning, I told Emily I needed some time alone. I didn't give her a reason, just said that work had been overwhelming and I needed to clear my head. Her reaction was immediate, concern mixed with confusion. She asked if everything was okay, but I deflected, telling her it wasn't about her. I could see the worry in her eyes, but she didn't push further. I packed a bag and left that afternoon, renting a small apartment on the other side of town. It wasn't much, just a one-bedroom with basic furniture and no personality, but it was exactly what I needed. A space that was mine, free from the memories of Emily and the life we'd built together. At first, Emily gave me space, texting occasionally to check in, but not pressing for details. But as the days turned into weeks, her messages became more frequent, more insistent. She wanted to know why I'd left, what she could do to fix things if I was coming back. Her tone shifted from confusion to desperation, and I could sense the cracks in her facade growing wider. She started doing everything she could to prove she was the perfect wife. She sent me photos of the house, cleaned and organized to perfection, with notes about how much she missed me. She dropped off homemade meals at my apartment, leaving them on the doorstep with little notes that read, "Come home. We miss you." She even reached out to my friends, asking them to talk to me, to remind me of how strong our marriage had been. I wanted to feel something, anger, sadness, even a glimmer of hope that maybe things could be fixed. But all I felt was emptiness. Every grand gesture, every tear-filled voicemail felt hollow. I knew the truth, and no amount of effort on her part could erase what I'd seen. Emily's behavior grew more frantic as the weeks went on. She stopped going to concerts, deleted her social media accounts, and even returned all the band merchandise she'd collected over the past few months. She told me she was done with the band, that it had been a distraction she didn't need, that I was her priority. But I knew it wasn't about the band. It wasn't even about Jason. It was about the choices she'd made, the lies she'd told, and the trust she'd shattered. Her sudden shift toward being the perfect wife felt more like damage control than genuine remorse. The turning point came when she showed up at my apartment unannounced. She stood at the door, her eyes red and swollen, clutching a photo album filled with pictures from our wedding and the years we'd spent together. She begged me to come home, saying she'd do anything to fix things, that she couldn't imagine life without me. I stood there, staring at the woman I'd once loved more than anything, and felt nothing. The betrayal had hollowed me out, leaving no room for forgiveness or reconciliation. I told her I needed more time and closed the door, her sobs echoing in the hallway as I walked away. That night, as I sat alone in my apartment, I realized the marriage I'd been clinging to was already gone. Emily's efforts to be the perfect wife weren't enough. Not because she wasn't trying, but because the foundation of our relationship had been irreparably damaged. After weeks of distance and uncertainty, I decided to give Emily one last chance. A part of me didn't want to believe that our marriage was beyond saving. I thought, maybe, just maybe, her desperate attempts to fix things were genuine. Maybe the Emily I had fallen in love with was still in there, waiting for an opportunity to rebuild what we had. I told her I was willing to try again. Her reaction was immediate. Tears of relief, promises of change, and heartfelt vows that she'd do whatever it took to make things right. She swore that she was done with the band, done with Jason, done with anything that could jeopardize our relationship. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that this could be the start of something new. We agreed to take things slowly. I moved back into the house, but kept my guard up, watching for any signs that her words didn't match her actions. At first, things seemed to improve. Emily was attentive, present, and eager to prove herself. She planned date nights, cooked my favorite meals, and even left sweet notes for me to find throughout the day. It felt like the woman I had married was back, and for a brief moment, I allowed myself to hope. But hope is a fragile thing, and mine was shattered sooner than I expected. One evening, while Emily was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I wouldn't have thought much of it, but the name on the screen made my stomach drop. Jason. The message was short. Miss you. Can we talk? My hands shook as I unlocked her phone. Emily hadn't bothered to change her password, a sign, perhaps, that she thought her secrets were still safe. What I found confirmed the worst. Their messages picked up right where they'd left off. Despite all her promises, despite her tearful pleas for me to come home, Emily had been in contact with Jason the entire time. Their conversations were casual at first, innocent enough to pass as friendly, but quickly became more intimate. Jason sent her photos from the road, and Emily responded with inside jokes and compliments that felt far too familiar. The most damning message was from just a few days earlier. I'll find time to see you soon. I can't stay away. Her reply made my chest tighten. I feel the same way. I need to be careful. He's trying to trust me again. I stared at the screen, the words blurring as the weight of her betrayal settled over me. She wasn't just lying to me. She was mocking my willingness to give her another chance. Every tear she'd cried, every promise she'd made, every effort she'd shown to rebuild our marriage had been a lie. I scrolled further, finding plans they'd made to meet in a neighboring city. While I'd been sitting in the house, trying to piece together the broken fragments of our life, Emily had been plotting to see him. She wasn't rebuilding our marriage. She was using it as a cover for her affair. I couldn't stay quiet this time. The evidence was irrefutable, the betrayal too blatant to ignore. I took screenshots of the messages and forwarded them to myself, ensuring I had everything I needed for what came next. When Emily came out of the shower, her hair wrapped in a towel and a smile on her face, I couldn't even look at her. She asked if everything was okay, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. The truth was sitting in my pocket, burning a hole in my resolve, but I wasn't ready to confront her yet. That night, as she slept beside me, I stayed awake, replaying the past few months in my mind. Every lie, every excuse, every moment I'd second-guess myself, it all came rushing back. Emily had made her choice, and now I was making mine. The next morning, I left the house without saying a word. I called my lawyer and told him to move forward with the divorce. This time, there would be no reconciliation, no second chances, no room for her lies to grow. By the time I filed the divorce papers, I knew I needed to do more than just leave Emily. Walking away felt too easy, too passive. After everything she'd done, betraying my trust, lying to my face while begging for a second chance, and continuing her affair with Jason, I couldn't let her escape unscathed. I didn't just want to move on. I wanted her to understand the consequences of her choices. Revenge isn't something that comes naturally to me, but when the betrayal is so personal, it sparks something primal. My plan wasn't about pettiness. It was about exposing the truth and ensuring she faced the fallout of her actions. I started by compiling all the evidence I'd gathered: the text messages, the screenshots, and the video of her and Jason in the alley. Together, they painted a clear picture of her infidelity and deceit. I didn't want to spread rumors or rely on hearsay. I wanted cold, hard facts to back me up when the truth came to light. Next, I reached out to the people closest to us, her friends, her family, even a few of her colleagues. I sent them a carefully worded email explaining why I had filed for divorce, attaching the evidence for clarity. I kept it professional, free of anger or bitterness. This wasn't about smearing her reputation. It was about making sure she couldn't twist the narrative to make herself the victim. The reaction was swift. Her friends, many of whom had defended her and tried to encourage me to reconcile, were shocked. A few reached out to apologize, admitting they'd been unaware of her actions. Her family was devastated, their disappointment evident in the curt messages they sent her. But the real impact came when I shared the truth with Jason's band. Using a fake email account, I sent the screenshots and video to their manager and the other band members. Jason had built his career on being the down-to-earth, relatable rocker, a persona that didn't exactly align with sleeping with a married fan. The band was gearing up for a small tour, and I knew the timing couldn't have been worse for him. I didn't stop there. Jason had a girlfriend, something Emily had conveniently failed to mention in her texts. Through a little digging on social media, I found her profile and sent her the evidence as well. Her response was immediate and explosive. She thanked me for telling her and promised to handle it. I could only imagine what that conversation looked like. As for Emily, the fallout hit her like a tidal wave. She showed up at my apartment the day after the emails went out, her face pale and her eyes red from crying. She begged me to reconsider, to let her explain. She said I'd ruined her relationships, her friendships, her reputation. I stood there, calm and unmoving, and told her she'd done that all on her own. Her desperation turned to anger. She accused me of being vindictive, of trying to ruin her life. I didn't respond. Her words couldn't hurt me anymore, not after everything she'd done. I handed her the divorce papers and told her to sign them. The look on her face was one of utter defeat. But the most satisfying moment came a few weeks later when I heard from a mutual friend that Jason's band had dropped him. The manager decided to cut ties, citing the unwanted attention his behavior had brought to the group. His girlfriend had left him, and his social media presence had gone eerily quiet. Emily had chosen to throw away our marriage for a man who couldn't even keep his job. In the end, Emily got what she wanted: freedom, but it came at a price. She lost the support of her friends, the respect of her family, and the life we'd built together. She moved out of the house, leaving behind the memories of a marriage she'd destroyed. As for me, I felt a sense of closure. Revenge didn't erase the pain of her betrayal, but it gave me the strength to move forward. I was no longer the husband who ignored the warning signs, who doubted his instincts, who let himself be blindsided by someone he trusted. Looking back, I've learned more from this experience than I ever thought possible. Betrayal is a brutal teacher, but it forces you to see people and yourself clearly. It showed me the importance of trusting my instincts, of standing up for myself, and of walking away when something no longer serves you. Today, I'm in a better place than I ever imagined. The scars are still there, but they've become part of my story, a reminder of my strength and resilience. Life after betrayal is possible, and it's worth fighting for. As for Emily and Jason, I don't know where they are or what they're doing. And honestly, I don't care. That chapter is closed, and I'm finally free to write the next one on my own terms.